How you doing, Professor Kelly? Today I wanted to talk about sports and the value of all of it and some of the economics behind it. Because I really like sports, it's something I'm passionate about, and I figured there would be a lot of tie-ins to economics and what we've learned this year. So first off, the product of sports would be considered a service, right? It would be served as entertainment value for the consumer, and a lot of times they would gain utility from that in different ways, whether it's going to the game, being a fan of the game, stuff like that. So first, I want to talk about the most 50 valuable sports franchises in the world. I actually got all this data from Forbes.com in 2019. I think they did this in May. So first, before let's talk about this graph. And before I get into all that, I just want to clarify that these teams over here in the orange are baseball teams. These blue bars right here are the basketball teams. This big group of yellow bars right here are American football teams. And the black bars all the way to the right are the European football teams or soccer teams. Just we'll call it that. So first, let's talk about the football teams. The football teams comprise the majority, as you can see, of the data right here. So there are 26 teams, NFL teams, in the top 50 most valuable sports franchises in the world. That shows you how much the NFL has been able to monetize and profit off of a lot of the markets inside of the United States. At the top, we have the Dallas Cowboys, and although it's not the least valuable franchise, rounding out the top 50, the least valuable out of the top 50 are the New Orleans Saints. They come in at 26th place. So how do these teams make all this money, right? There are different ways that teams make money and gain revenue. So the first way that they do it is through TV contracts. TV contracts make up a majority of the way that teams make money. So the NFL actually has different contracts with different networks. They have it with NBC, Fox, CBS, ESPN, and NFL Network. So they have different channels that stream different programs. So I think the NFC is streamed on Fox, whereas I think CBS streams the AFC. And then during the playoffs, they'll also have different games. Also, NBC, I believe, does Sunday Night Football. ESPN does Monday Night Football, and NFL Network usually does Thursday Night Football. So that's the primary way that a lot of these teams make their money. And NFL has been able to manage so that they've gotten the most out of their TV deals. We'll talk about TV deals later with some of these other leagues and the other sports, but NFL by far has the biggest contracts with their TV providers because they make the most money. They're going to make these networks the most money with advertisements, stuff like that. Also, the way that these, before we get into the other stuff, teams also make money through merchandise, through ticket sales, but the majority of what we're going to be talking about are the TV contracts because that's what's making the most money for these teams. So, next, we have basketball. Basketball, these blue teams right here, as I said earlier. Basketball is actually one of the fastest growing markets in the United States. I'm actually going to pull up a different graph before we get out of here. Which one is it right here? So this shows all the different growth between the different sports in the United States. On top, obviously, we have the NFL, which we discussed earlier, the biggest market and the most profitable market. And then next, we have the National Basketball, the black, we have the MLB, which is baseball. In gray, we have the NBA. And down here in red, we have the NHL. So, as we can see, from 2007 to 2013, it's relatively similar growth here, right? Like all the leagues are growing at about the same pace. But right around 2013 to 2014 is when this begins to shift. So, the NFL obviously skyrockets in revenue and in value. MLB also grows, but not quite as fast. And the NBA is growing at one of the fastest rates. So, if we take a team like the Lakers, right? So, currently, the Lakers are the second most valuable NBA franchise behind the New York Knicks. And the Lakers in 2012 were the most valuable team in the NBA. They were worth about $900 million. 7 years later, they're worth about $3.7 billion. So their value in about 9 years, in the course of 7 years, their value has essentially quadrupled, which has shown you how fast this market is growing, how fast the NBA and professional sports as a whole has been growing. Excuse me. And talk about their TV contracts, the NBA's TV contracts with TNT, ABC, ESPN, NBA TV, and unlike the NFL, which broadcasts their games basically nationally, and they have some, like they'll have the local teams be on one of the major networks. They'll have smaller TV networks broadcast local games. So for example, the 76ers, I know for the Philadelphia market, they'll play on NBCSN, which is basically Comcast Sportsnet for Philadelphia. So those are the different TV contracts that the NBA has, and they've done a really good job of growing into other markets. This is part of the macro element that comes with it. So different markets such as China has been huge for them. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Yao Ming have all done a great job of reaching that Chinese market, and which has been huge for the NBA. They've also been trying to reach into Europe. There are a lot of European players in the NBA, which does a great job for getting worldwide viewers. Also, the NBA has been trying to reach into the Mexican market as well. The NBA has been playing games in Mexico City. Teams like the Dallas Mavericks, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Houston Rockets have all been playing, and the Suns as well have been playing in Mexico City to try and get that Mexican market more active for the NBA. And then let's talk about the giant. I mean, maybe not here, but in Europe, there are so many different things to talk about with the soccer market. So the soccer teams are over here in black, and although they have not as many teams here, they have a lot of teams up in the upper echelon. So they actually have 3 different soccer teams in the top 3, which is the most for any other sport. I think the top 5, it goes the Dallas Cowboys, then the Yankees. I believe the Patriots are next. I don't know. Sorry, I messed that up. But there were 3 soccer teams in the top 6. After that, there begins a quite steep drop off. But as you can see, Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, Manchester United, 3 of the top most valuable teams in the world. They all do a great job. One advantage that soccer has over all of these is the market is absolutely enormous. So soccer, as many people say, is the most popular sport in the world. It's played on almost every single continent, and it's watched by so many different people around the world. And unlike football, baseball, and to a lesser degree basketball, where their markets are mostly concentrated inside of the United States, soccer's following is basically worldwide, and the teams that do the best job of marketing themselves and monetizing that are some of the most expensive in the world. So when we talk about the TV contracts, there are a lot of different TV contracts because there are a lot of different leagues in Europe. So in Europe, they have this thing called the Big 5 League, which is it's kind of like college football almost, where the best teams in the world are generally in Italy, which is called Serie A, in England, the Premier League, Germany, the Bundesliga, Spain, La Liga, or France, Ligue 1. So those 5 leagues compose most of the money that the FIFA and UEFA is getting when they market those teams. There's also smaller leagues. There's a league in Russia, Turkey. Almost every single country has a league, but those top 5 leagues in Europe are going to make the most money. So, excuse me again, sorry. The Premier League is, when we talk about the TV contracts in America, I'm not sure how this plays out in Europe, but in America, the Premier League, which is the British league, has a TV contract with NBC Sports. The Bundesliga, which is again the German league, they're on Fox, Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2. La Liga, which is the Spanish league, is BN Sports. Serie A, which is the Italian league, is on ESPN Plus, and France, the Ligue 1 is on BN Sports as well. And also, what it makes soccer different is there are a lot of different competitions. So, aside from the regular standard leagues that they also have a tournament each year called the Champions League and the Europa League. So those are European tournaments to see who is the best team in Europe. So the Champions League would be the best. Europa League would be a notch below that. So if you can win the Champions League, that's going to bring in a lot of revenue for your team. And those games are also broadcasted on TNT through Bleacher Report. And we have some statistics here that I just want to say. It says the Premier League revenue for the season that ended in 2018 hit 5.44 billion euros, which is about $6 billion in America. That's more than 70% over its nearest Big Five European competitor, the German Bundesliga, according to sports business analyst at Deloitte. The German league narrowly overtook the Spanish counterpart, La Liga, in the second slot, they said in a report. So I have a graph that shows that as well. Let's see here. So this is a graph that kind of shows the money that's being made in Europe with soccer. So up top is England, and then as I just mentioned, these two lines are the Bundesliga and La Liga respectively. They're kind of battling for that second spot. And then falling behind is Italy and then France. So what's going on here is actually super interesting if you pay attention to soccer. The parity that some people are worried about in the league basically stems from all the money. The British Premier League, the German League, and the Spanish League have so much money available for those teams that a lot of the players are starting to move there, and people are worried about some of the parity that might happen in those leagues, which is interesting if you follow soccer. But getting back to what we were talking about earlier with the top 50, Sky Sports also broadcast deals have increased. So when we're getting back to those TV deals, again, Sky Sports in England makes a lot of money from that, and UEFA, who kind of runs the Champions League, who kind of runs the international stuff with soccer, their TV deals in Europe are getting more and more expensive as well. Let's next talk about baseball. So baseball, again, are these teams here. And baseball has done a pretty good job of maintaining where they are. They're not pulling ahead by a great margin, but they're also not falling behind like the NHL is. Baseball teams, New York Yankees, obviously one of the most expensive franchises in the world. And we know that every single year when they're able to pay for players, pay massive contracts for players without a salary cap in the MLB. So that's super interesting. The TV contracts for baseball are with Fox, FS1, TBS, ESPN, and MLB Network. So they've been able to get a pretty decent money from those different TV contracts, but obviously they are losing out to the NBA and the NFL. They're starting to slow down a little bit. And then let's talk about the NHL, or the lack thereof. So the NHL, the next highest team outside of these four, like baseball, basketball, football, and soccer, the next highest team value are the New York Rangers. They're at 72nd, where they have a value of $1.55 billion. So as you can see, hockey just really isn't a big moneymaker inside the United States, outside the United States really. When you're the 72nd most valuable franchise in the world, that's not really to write home about. The TV contracts just aren't that lucrative either. They're with NBCSN, NBC, and the NHL Network, so really not too much that hockey teams right now at the moment are able to do, especially when a lot of these other sports are kind of launching off right now with how much money is being made. So when we talk about the rapid increase in revenue, I'll show some graphs to kind of display what that looks like. So first thing I have is back to this graph. We can see how much these leagues are growing and how much money they're making. If we do like a 12-year kind of difference here, the NFL right here is about $1 billion in revenue, and that springboards all the way up that's $100 billion, I think. Regardless, if we take a look here to here, we can see the growth is almost 3 times for the NFL. For the NBA, almost threefold as well, same with the MLB, whereas the NHL is roughly about double. And when we talk about, pull up another graph, some of the league's growth, this is the MLB's growth, revenue per year, so this goes all the way back from 2001 to 2018. We can see that in 2001, the league revenue in billions of dollars, about 3.58. In 2018, it was 9.9, so about 10 billion. So they've grown about 3 times in that amount of time, which is pretty decent. When we have, sports sponsorships as well. So going back to how teams make money, sports sponsorships in North America, we can see how much they've made and how much they're projected to make going through 2023. So they're going to continue to increase. But going back, sorry, I kind of got off topic there, to the rapid increase in money in sports. We can see in 2012, which is just 7 years ago, the most valuable team was $2.2 billion, and the 50th most valuable team was about $674 million. In 7 years, that 2.2 billion max has gone all the way up to 5 billion, and that 674 million 50th spot has turned into 2 billion. So we can see the top end in 7 years has almost doubled, over doubled, and in that same amount of time, that 50th spot has almost tripled in value, from 674 million to 2.08 billion in 2019. And then also, a great picture, which I think represents this, is in the year 2012, there was only one team that was worth over $2 billion, and each year that has grown more and more. In 2019, every single team in the top 50 has been worth over $2 billion, whereas 7 short years ago, there was only one. So that kind of shows you how fast sports are growing and how much more lucrative they've become year over year in the past 10 years. Let's go back to this graph. So what does it mean? So a lot of when we're talking individuals, player salaries have gone up. I'm sure you've been able to recognize that if you follow professional sports. And then a lot of teams are taking on more opportunity costs. So that means higher facilities. They're spending more on facilities. They're able to pay more people to do different things, whether that's social media or athletic trainers, stuff like that. And then also paying for advertisements to get the team recognition out a little bit more, and expanding into different markets. So when we're talking about expanding into different markets, there is a lot of global involvement when it comes to sports, which is part of the macro element when we're talking about sports. So football, American football has done an effort to try and reach into Mexico and London. They've had teams like the Oakland Raiders play in Mexico City, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, most notably, has played in London quite a bit. So they're trying to get those markets, which they previously didn't really have. The NBA, as I said earlier, becoming more and more of a global game. In Asia specifically, they have a great program where Chinese basketball players are extremely passionate about the NBA. The Philippines are extremely passionate about the NBA. They watch a lot of NBA games. So there's a huge market in Asia with over 1 billion people in China itself, and then plus a lot of the countries surrounding in Southeast Asia. There's a huge market to be had there, and the NBA is doing a good job of moving in there. Also, like I said, there are a lot of foreign-born NBA players from Europe, South America, so they do a decent job of getting those markets as well, just by having those foreign-born players play in the league to represent those countries. And in soccer as well, obviously European soccer, they're getting players from all over the world. If you look at a singular team, you can see 10, 20 different flags representing somebody, like the different players' nationalities. So they do a really good job of having everybody kind of pay attention to what they're doing. And another way that teams are getting involved is they're actually selling the rights to their teams to different owners across the world. So a good example of that is, although they're not in the top 50 that like we're talking about here, Chinese investment in European soccer has been huge. So there are currently 3 teams in the Premier League that are owned by Chinese investors. Wolverhampton Wanderers, West Bromwich, and Southampton. All those 3 teams are currently owned by Chinese billionaires, and some people, what they think is going on is they think they're investing in British soccer so that they can reinvest that, they can make money off of that and then reinvest it back into the country so that they can pay for infrastructure and have it be Chinese owned so that they kind of have stock, or they have a little bit of money invested in a country, so that money goes back to China, you know what I mean? And they're looking to basically create influence in the region through Chinese infrastructure. And then also, it means positive things for the global economy. When we're talking about the Olympics, or maybe say the World Cup, global events, global sporting events, it can make or break many economies. For example, in 2016, when Brazil hosted the Olympics, they had to do massive projects for their infrastructure. It cost them billions and billions of dollars just to try and be able to build stadiums in time, build roads to get to the stadiums, airports. There are so many infrastructure challenges that comes with hosting such an event like the World Cup or like the Olympics. So it can really test an economy and how well they're able to meet with those demands. In Brazil's case, a lot of those things kind of crumbled after a couple of years, just after the Olympics. And in some other cases, like if you look at Los Angeles in the 1990s, or sorry, maybe it was the 1980s, they did a great job hosting the Olympics. Barcelona, I remember, they actually created beaches for their Olympics and their Olympic Games. So that's a way that a country invests in its local economy to be able to make a lot of money off of these sporting events. And finally, just a couple of macroeconomics tie-ins that I may have not mentioned. Many sports franchises, as I said earlier, kind of take on opportunity costs for things such as advertisements, facilities, salaries, in order to have the opportunity to make money in these markets. So obviously, if you're a smaller team in the NFL, you're looking at the top half and saying, there's so much money to be made here, how can we get in on that? I'm sure a lot of the European soccer leagues are looking and doing the same thing, and basketball as well. One concern that I have when we're looking at all these different teams is I think baseball is going to start to fall behind, and I think they have to do a better job of making those opportunity costs and being able to kind of bite the bullet in some of those costs so that they can increase their market. And finally, there are different different forms of ownerships in professional sports. So early in the year, we talked about sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporations. So a team like the Dallas Cowboys is under a sole proprietorship. As many people know, Jerry Jones is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And then the New York Yankees is owned by a family, so that would be considered more like a partnership. And then actually, it's interesting, although there are no actual corporations that run teams, there are a lot of teams that are kind of run like corporations. FC Barcelona and Real Madrid, two of the most valuable sports franchises in the world, specifically in Europe. They do what they have like stockholders. So the team is owned by thousands of people, and they're not really beholden to one specific person to make the decisions. They kind of have like a board make a lot of their executive decisions, which is kind of interesting because it's almost run like a corporation would be in the United States. So that's all that I have for you today. I think this is a good way of kind of showing how the value of sports, the market of sports, the economics of sports has changed in the past 10 years. I found this really interesting. I didn't know that I knew that sports were growing in the worldwide, but I didn't know that they were growing at this rate. And I think this is super interesting stuff that I was able to tie a lot of the ideas that we learned in macroeconomics this year. Thank you for a great year, Professor Kelly, and take care.